this week's Supply Chain Video News.
Hi, I'm Jim Stevens.
And I'm Dan Gilmore.
In this week's Supply Chain News that matters from the Supply Chain Television Channel and CSCMP, JDA Software CEO Bal Dale updates us on recent major changes at the supply chain software giant.
Our Q3 review of trends and results in the less-than-truckload sector.
DHL looking to deliver online orders to parked cars? Those stories, plus the Supply Chain Weekend numbers in 20 seconds. In this week's Supply Chain numbers, U.S. e-commerce sales continue to move ahead at a steady pace. The latest quarterly review of e-commerce from the U.S. Census Bureau found that online sales rose 16.2% in Q3 versus the same period in 2013, and the strongest quarterly gain since last year's third quarter. That puts e-commerce as a percent of total U.S. retail sales at 6.6% of all retail sales, up from 5.9% in Q3 2013, but obviously the share of e-commerce spend is much higher than that in categories such as media, electronics, and apparel. U.S. manufacturing numbers for October were released last week by the Federal Reserve, which showed manufacturing output rose a couple of ticks to a level of 100.6, meaning U.S. output was 0.6% over the peak and baseline year of 2007. That makes 4 straight months over that 100 mark since the U.S. finally made it back to that peak year output in July, after a long but steady climb from the 80% level reached at the bottom of the recession in June 2009. Capacity utilization stayed about flat at 77.2%, as the U.S. just cannot get that number back to its long-run average of 78.7%. Back in the 1990s, capacity utilization reached a high of more than 85%. 12. That's the number of days that the International Longshore and Warehouse Union said that it will take as a break from the big table negotiations with the Pacific Maritime Association that represents West Coast ports and terminals. That means negotiations on the full contract won't resume until December 2nd, even as ILWU members have been working without a contract since June 30th, with recent PMA allegations that ILWU has orchestrated labor slowdowns in recent weeks, leading to massive congestion at some ports, notably LA Long Beach, but all the other West Coast ports to one degree or another. The ILWU has rejected recent PMA calls for signing a contract extension because that could trigger a mandatory arbitration process to resolve the issues. As to date, the federal government has largely stayed out of the talks.
When there's news out of JDA Software, it's usually a pretty big deal, given the JDA's position is by far the largest so-called best-of-breed software company with thousands of customers across the world. And let me tell you, 2014 has been a year of a lot of news out of JDA Software, starting earlier in the year with some changes at the top, and now a couple of very important announcements over the last month or so. We're very, very pleased to have here today JDA Software CEO Bal Dale to discuss some of these recent announcements. He's coming to us today from his home office in the New Jersey area. Bal, very excited to have you here today on the Supply Chain Television Channel.
Dan, it's great to be here. Good to talk to you again.
Okay, last May you made a change. You were at the time chairman of JDA Software, part of its private equity owners New Mountain Capital. You made a change at the top, replacing the CEO, and you took over in the interim position. Here we are 5 months later, and it's announced you're going to take on the role permanently, something I suggested was actually quite a likely possibility back in May. Just give our audience a little bit of a backdrop, sort of what sort of transpired between May and October, and your thoughts on taking over on a permanent basis.
Happy to. So first of all, Dan, you were ahead of your time. But first of all, I would say is I'm very excited to be taking on the role on a full-time basis. I think 2 things came to be. The first is that as I spent more time with the customers, spent more time understanding the company, so understanding the fact we had 4,800 associates focused in the supply chain space, the depth and breadth of our solutions and our products, and then also just the intellectual property we had. became very excited by the potential within JDA. At the same time, even though I was the interim chairman, I did make a number of changes. So we established the new Global Industries and Solutions Group, which is focused really on developing our solutions and our products. We also appointed a new head of sales, and he's responsible for driving deeper relationships with our customers, and at the same time building out our alliance strategy and our ecosystem. And then finally, we created the JDA Innovation Labs, and they're responsible for looking at transformative technology and how we can apply that into our solution suites. And so, and all three of those things have had very positive momentum with our customers and with our associates. And so I think the board looked at that and realized that the changes were very positive, well received, like I said, with our customers and our associates. And so it was a mutual thing where I expressed an interest just given the potential I saw in the company, and the board, having seen some of the changes I'd made, said, look, we'd love you to take this role on a full-time basis. So that's how it all came to be. And as I said, I'm incredibly excited to be taking on the role on a full-time basis.
Yeah, very good. And that makes so much sense. I mean, obviously to have somebody come in from the outside after all these strategies and moves and everything were in place would be, perhaps a little bit challenging, whereas you were, obviously at the center of developing all of those things. So it makes perfect sense. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Right after, I think the week after, it was announced that you were going to take on the role of CEO on a permanent basis. There was a series of announcements around kind of rebranding of JDA. That involved kind of at the headline level, changing the long-term tagline of the supply chain company that had been inherited from the i2 acquisition 3-4 years ago, to now it's a plan to deliver. It's catchy. I like it. But branding at sort of the tagline level obviously only takes you so far from a marketing perspective. What's kind of behind that, if anything, that really going to have something that customers can really relate to in terms of how that tagline relates to what's actually happening inside the company?
Yeah, no, so exactly right. It's more than just the logo and the tagline. I think the first thing is that the new identity, the new JDA, really encapsulates the value we've delivered to our customers over the years through our innovative solutions and the 4,800 associates we have dedicated to the supply chain space. And so by using JDA, customers can really plan to deliver to their customers. And so that's the first piece. It's really a new identity. And then our tagline, Plan to Deliver, really covers what JDA does, because we obviously cover both planning, supply chain planning, but also supply chain delivery. And so the Plan to Deliver tagline covers really the breadth and depth we have in our solutions. And ultimately, customers using JDA solutions can plan to deliver to their customers, both the products, but also they can deliver a new type of experience leveraging the JDA solutions, and at the same time also deliver to their shareholders and their owners the financial results that they need to deliver. So that's really the whole notion around Plan to Deliver. And then the last thing is it's also an internal rallying cry, because obviously we plan to deliver to our customers so they can plan to deliver to their customers. And so beyond it just being a logo and a tagline, it's actually a brand promise. And the only way you can implement that brand promise is through culture. And so we're actually leveraging the Plan to Deliver tagline to take on a cultural change within JDA.
Okay, very good. And that's actually, Bal, your comments there are a great segue into my last question. Seems to me JDA is betting quite a bit on this sort of integrated planning and execution. We've certainly done some work in that area. No question, it's something that seems to be of great interest to companies. Part of that comes obviously from the acquisition of Red Prairie late 2012, but frankly, JDA has some other execution-oriented applications as well, not just the warehouse management stuff from Red Prairie. So maybe two-part question, but what are you doing to really drive the value and show the value of that integrated planning and execution? And what's the receptivity, what's the uptake out there in the marketplace?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. So, even though supply chains have evolved and become more agile and more flexible, we still believe there's a lot of efficiency and hence money being left on the table because the planning and the execution systems are siloed. And the more I've talked to customers and really folks like yourself, the more we realize that there's a lot of value to be created by bringing the planning and the execution systems together so that the plans are more executable and the supply chains are more nimble. And so as I've talked to customers, they've really start to see the value of having planning and execution much more tightly linked together. And a good example of that is our Intelligent Fulfillment Suite, where we take transportation management, warehouse management, and demand and fulfill, which are, leading products in their own right, but actually combining them and getting them more tightly integrated at the optimization level. We believe that will unlock a lot of value for our customers, and we're hearing that from our customers as well.
Okay, very good, DeBow. Great comments. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Look forward to seeing you the second week of January at the NRF show in New York City. Let's hope it warms up a little bit by then.
Absolutely. Hope great. I look forward to seeing you then, and hopefully, like you said, it'll be a lot warmer.
Okay, thanks again, Bow.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals is pleased to announce that Howard Schultz, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Starbucks, will be the keynote speaker at its 2015 annual conference, September 27th through 30th in San Diego, California. CSCMP's annual conference is supply chain's premier event. It is the largest of its kind in the world for supply chain and logistics management professionals, offering innovative solutions and actionable outcomes that attendees can take back to their companies to improve their supply chain's performance. The event attracts more than 3,000 global practitioners, educators, and thought leaders each year. Not only will you connect with the brightest minds in the industry and discover the latest thinking at CSCMP's conference, you'll also receive a copy of the recently released book called For Love of Country, co-written by Schultz, in your registration kit, absolutely free. In addition, CSCMP will donate a portion of the proceeds to the Wounded Warrior Project. Register today at cscmp.org under the annual conference tab.
In our supply chain news roundup, we finish off our analysis of results and trends in Q3 by different freight sectors with a look at the LTL carriers. For this seemingly always financially challenged group, it was about as good as it gets from a financial perspective, with net income across the group of 5 public LTL carriers we follow up to 5.2% of total revenue. Well, that's pretty good for the LTL sector. Compare that number to 6.3% in the truckload sector and a whopping 19.7% among the 4 publicly traded rail carriers. Volume gains in the quarter were strong, reflective of the overall freight market and some crossover volume from the truckload sector as capacities there in Q3 remained very tight. ArcBest, the parent of ABF Freight, Old Dominion, Conway Freight's LTL unit, and SAIA all had strong profits in the quarter. Only YRC Worldwide was left out of the profit party, but it did eke out a small gain of about $1.2 million on $1.3 billion in total revenue. Still, that was a lot better than the $44 million loss it had in Q3 2013. Operating ratios, or operating expense divided by operating revenues, a key transportation industry metric, were down to just 92.1 for our group from 93.1 in 2013. Carriers described a generally strong pricing environment with rates up in the 2% range or so in the quarter, it seemed, based on their comments. But as usual, Old Dominion kind of blew away the field in almost every measure, seeing revenue growth of almost 19%, mostly on market share gains, and driving its OR down in Q3 to just 83.0% from 84.1% in 2013. The next closest LTL carrier was SAIA with an OR of 91.8%, almost 9 percentage points higher than Old Dominion's number. One of these days, we're going to have to figure out what is driving Old Dominion's incredible performance.
The e-fulfillment wars continue to get more and more interesting, with news last week that global parcel shipping giant DHL is working on an agreement to deliver to parked cars. Bloomberg.com reported last week that DHL is in talks with Volvo Car Group on a partnership that would allow the parcel delivery service to remotely open autos made by the Swedish car maker. It said DHL is in discussions with other auto OEMs as well. The concept is just one of several that DHL is experimenting with at several to ensure that online orders are delivered safely on the first attempt, a crucial part of maintaining profitability of such operations. DHL, as with Amazon.com and Walmart, is also rolling out storage lockers where orders can be placed for customer pickup. Some retailers in Europe are also experimenting with lockers placed, say, in the parking lots of busy subway train stations. so that commuters can grab their orders before they head home. So if you open your car after work and there's a parcel in the front seat anytime soon, this may be how it got there. In our supply chain executives on the move section, some executive shuffling at GM, where the auto giant announced that Steve Kiefer, who had been vice president of GM's global powertrain business, has been named vice president of global purchasing and supply chain. He succeeds Grace Lieblein, who has been named vice president for global quality. Congratulations to both of them. Okay, that's it for this week's Supply Chain News. We're off next week after the Thanksgiving holiday. We'll see you the week after that from the Supply Chain Television channel and CSCMP. For Dan Gilmore, I'm Jim Stevens. Keep it moving.